This is Gemara Shavuos Daf Lamed Ches, and we're holding Lamed Zayin with Beis. We pulled up a little bit short, 5 lines from the medium-sized lines, and we'd like to once again dedicate all the incredible Schusim HaTorah, Talmud Torah, Pirabim, as an incredible Schus Refuah Shlema for Tinok Mrim Ahuva, B'Seich Sha'ar Chayle Yisrael. So 5 lines from the bottom, Itmar, we introduce a case. Mashbiya Ede Karka, where someone asks Edim if they can give Eidos about a certain piece of land, and he wants them to swear. So Pligi Rav Yochanan v'Rav Elazar, Chad Omar Chayiv v'Chad Omar Potter. And the case, of course, is that once again, as all the cases we've been seeing, the Eidim come along and they say they do not know the Eidos. Then they admit later that they were lying. What is the story in this case? Do we have our carbon for a Shavuos Eidos or not? Rav Elazar says, yes, you are Chayiv. Excuse me. It's Machlokes, Rav Yochanan, Rav Elazar. One says Chayiv, one says Potter. Who says what? That's going to be the discussion. Says the Gemara Tistayim, I'll bring you a raya to Rav Yochanan Damar Potter. B'damar Rav Yochanan, from the fact of Yochanan holds, b'imam jeish eidim chayiv. In a case of mamonis money that has eidim, there is a case in which you deny you're going to have to bring a carbon shtar, whereas in a similar case, if you deny you're selling in a shtar, Potter. Rav Yeshua on the first medium-sized line, Tistayim. And like Rav Yeshua that explained in a case of shtar, it's going to be similar to karka. We know shtar and karka, we often find incredible similarities between the two. So says the Gemara, that's going to teach us that in a similar case, if you deny knowing something about karka will be similar to denying knowing something about a shtar, and you're going to be potter, and that is our raya. The Rav Yochanan is the shita that says potter. Amar le Rav Yirmiyah le Rav Abba. Says the Gemara, okay, so you prove to me Rav Yochanan says potter. Fine. Rav Yirmiyah comes along and he says, what exactly is this machlokes? What is at the crux of this debate between Rav Yochanan and Rav Eliezer? So says Rav Yirmiyah to Rav Lema, shall we suggest Rav Yochanan, Rav Eliezer have looked at Rav Eliezer, Rabbanan Kamifli, a different machlokes, the Tanan, HaGoizel Sad Mechaveira V'Shatva Nar. Someone steals a field from his friend, and then a river sweeps through, destroying everything in the field. Chayiv Lamloi Sad Divi Rav Eliezer. Rav Eliezer says you got to give him back a field as you stole. No, Omer Lo, here I'm returning your field. It's destroyed. Who cares? That's your fault. V'amrina, and what is that? Machlokes. V'amrina v'maika miflgi. What is that machlokes? Darish riba yomiyuti. Excuse me. V'amrina v'maika miflgi. Or darish riba yomiyuti. V'rabanan darshi klali uprati. It's a machlokes how you learn the Torah, and the Gemara explains. Rav Eliezer darshi riba yomiyuti v'kichesh be'amisai. Says the Torah, and you lie to your friend. Riba, that includes with regard to a deposit or a loan. Miyat, that's a specific. Or any case that you swear a chaz of a riba. Teaches Rav Eliezer riba miyat riba. The halacha is riba yakol. Ma riba. What does it come to include? Riba kol mili. It comes to include kol mili. It comes to include all items could be stolen. Uma miyat. What does it exclude? Miyot shtaris shitas Rav Eliezer. For Rabbanan, no, darshi klali uprati. Kichesh v'amisei klal is a general statement. V'vikadon abisumas yad v'gazel. Prat is a specific. Oy mikol sheishav alav, anything in this word falls lichazer v'klal. So teach the Rabbanan klalu pratu klal. Iyat adon el ke'ina prat. How is it similar to the prat? Ma prat mefurash. Just like the brad is explicit, it's something movable and is cash. Say the chachamim, so what does that come to exclude? Now, like Rav Eliezer, Riba Yomiyuti, they're claiming to exclude shtar. but rather say the Chachamim Yatzu Karkais, Shein Mitaltel Yatzu Avadim, Shokshu L'Shataris, and Yatzu Shtarais, why Shavisham Mitaltelin, Ein Gufay Mamun. And the Machlekes between Rav Eliezer and the Chachamim. So says the Gemara, how does this relate back to our Machlekes of Rav Yochanan and Rav Eliezer? Man de Mechayev, which we learned to be Rav Eliezer, Rav Eliezer. Man de Potar, Kirabonon. Amar Le, Shavuos is back to Rav Yirmiyah, nothing doing. Loi, Man de Mechayev really can go to Rav Eliezer, like you suggested. But Uman de Potar, you know what he's going to respond to? We said it's Rav Yochanan. Amr L'cha, he's going to tell you, Baha, in this case, I feel Rav Eliezer will be moided to me. Why? D'Rachmana Amar Mikol V'loi Hakol, from anything and not anything. And that's going to come to include, and therefore Rav Eliezer is going to say that it's going to come to exclude one more case by us, which will be Karka. So says the Gemara, the two are not interdependent. Rav Eliezer, Rav Yochanan, and Rav Eliezer, Rabbanan. Amar Rabba Mesheder Rava Mastisa and Nami Deka. I want to bring a raya to the way that we just explained the Machlekes of Yochanan and Rav Eliezer. Says the Gemara Teketani. Ganavte Shairi. If someone said he stole my ox, or like Ganavte Mashriachana, swear to me, please. Amar Amin. Yes. Chayiv, and of course he swore falsely. He has to bring a carbon if he swore falsely. Did not say the case where you stole my eved. Rather, it's the case of stole my shar. My timer. La misham the eved is karkoish. And when we being karn, I'll give you a shiva karkoish. So proves the Gemara, like we just proved, Shitas Rabbi Yochanan, that there's no carbon for denying karka. Amar Rapapi Mishmei Rava Ema Seifa. Says Rapapi, no raya. The end of that Mishnah says that Klal Kol Mishal Mal Biyatz. Anytime you pay by yourself, Chayiv, there will be an asham. Shein Mishal Biyatz Potter. Zeh Klal Asuyimai. What did this Seifa mean when it came to say Zeh Klal? This is the rule. Lav Lasuyi Ganaftes Avdi is not coming to include a case where you stole my eved, and therefore our whole diak doesn't apply. The whole diak was what it say, a case of shar, and not eved. It says no. From the end of that Mishnah, in which it said Zaklal, that l'chayra comes to hone in on such a case of ganaftis avdi, and therefore we have no raya. Ella, as we turn over to Lamechesam and Aleph, says the Gemara, you're right. Meha lekal amashim. No, we have no raya to Rav Yochanan or not. And we continue in the top of Lamechesam and Aleph, quoting the next part of the Mishnah. Shur sabikadan keitzad tenli bikadan sheishli biyadcha. The Mishnah said in multiple cases where there were 5 different claims, and it results in one shvuah, or 5 different shvuos, different cases in the Mishnah. So the Gemara comes along on the third line of Lamechesam and Aleph. The Gemara comes along to qualify and clarify, I should say, when do these cases apply? Tanu Rabbanan Klal, if the one who's timing in Bezdin, if the defendant came along and he was kolal, he included it all in one statement, Einay chayav al yachas. But parat, if he explicated each case, chayav kol achas v'achas tivri Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shvua leilach v'leilach v'leilach, then chayav kol achas v'achas. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, leilach v'leilach v'leilach, shvua, then chayav kol achas v'achas. Shemin Omer, Achi Omer, shvua lekol achas v'achas. So multiple opinions. When will obligate more than one carbon? Is it parat, explaining each case? Is it saying shvuah, loylach, loylach, loylach? Is it saying loylach, 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 shvuah? All different shitais when there is multiple chiyuvim based on that which he said. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. 10 lines down, the first line is klaloi. Klaloi shel Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir included it all together. Pratei shel Rabbi Yehuda is the same case in which Rabbi Yehuda said is separate cases. Chlolei shel Rabbi Yehuda, Pratei shel Rabbi Meir. So each one holds the other one is wrong. Rav Yochanan Amar, no, Akol Moedim b'Viloilach Shu Parat. If he said Viloilach, that's called explaining. What's the machlokes? Biloilach without the vav. Rabbi Meir Omer, that's called Parat. Yehuda Amar Klal. Veizeu Klal Shel Rabbi Meir. What is a case in which Rabbi Meir says is not specific, but rather is general? Says the Gemara, Shavuos she'en lachem biyadi. So and says a Shavuos that I don't have anything in my possession. That's going to be a case of a klal, and that's to be a case in which there's only one chiyuv. So says the Gemara, b'maika mifti. What exactly is the case? What is the point of machlokes that Rameir is coming along when he says viloilach? It's multiple chiyuvim. Says the Gemara, Shmuel daik mi brayso, Rav Yochanan daik mi masnisen. Explains the Gemara. Shmuel daik mi brayso, mitikam Rav Yehuda viloilach parata. The brayso says according to Rav Yehuda, viloilach is a prat. Havi mechlal. What do we learn out from there? Disham the Rameir damar klal ave. Rameir said that he's a klal, and on that v'amar le Rav Yehuda no prat ave. That's called specific. Rav Yochanan Amar no. Tamar le Rameir prat ave. V'amar le Rav Yehuda biviloilach like shavav modina l'cha biloilach boligna lach. I'll be made with the vav and not without the vav. That is the first way Shmuel daik mi braysa. Ushmuel, and Shmuel is going to respond ad oidile odiyai. Ad oidile odiyai. Instead of saying a case which he agrees to Rameir, livli gavlei flugi is coming to argue, and that is how Shmuel learned. Now Rav Yochanan learned the opposite. So explains the Gemara, Rav Yochanan is daik mimas nisan, not from the braysa. Mitikamer Rameir, the fact that Rameir said what? Shavuos she'en lachem biyadi, that is a klal. Havei mechlal, we could infer. Diviloilach is going to be a prat ave. Diisakadai diviloilach is a klal, then he should have said that case. Havei midemashal Shavuos she'en lachem biyadi, nashvin and Shavuos loilach. Kol shekein Shavuos she'en lachem biyadi. Shmuel Amar no, Kolaimer Viloilach, Kolaimer Shavuos she'en lachem biyadi dam. It's the exact same case, and that's a one daik mi braysa and one daik mi mas nisan. Ask the Gemara, 2 lines in the white lines. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? Loilach viloilach. And even though each one is separate, he has to bring a separate carbon. What do we say? Seemingly, this Tana in the Mishnah is a Stam Tana. So we would assume Stam Tanas are Meir. Not like Shmuel. Tanis, Shmuel's going to say, Loi Lach, not Viloi Lach, and therefore it's not a kasha on Shmuel. Tashma, another kasha. Says our Mishnah, Tenli because of Musumas Yad because of Vavida. What do we see again? Those are all separate chiyuvim according to Rameir. Tani sumas yad gets aveda without the vav. Tashma, another kasha on the first white line. Ten lichitin usayrin ukosmin. Again, Shmuel responds to me usayrin ukosmin without the vav. Vaytana kol halchi shabish. Says the Gemara, this is getting wild. The Tana made so many mistakes. Shabish Tani va'azal, he kept on saying the same mistake. Ella says the Gemara, you're right. What were all these kashas predicated on? The fact that it said stam and we assumed it's Rameir. Says the Gemara, Hamani Rabbi. I'll explain to you all these are Shitas Rabbi. The Amar Loishana Kizayis, Loishana Kizayis, Ukizayis Pratahave. Rabbi disagrees. And Rabbi says whether it's a Vav or not, it's going to be the same Prat. Tashema, one that's kasha on Shmuel, Mididei. From Rameir's own words, what did Rameir say in our Mishnah? Says the Gemara again, today you have to change a chita sayer v'kusam without the vav. My afilu, but if that's true, what did Rameir say? Even. So Amar Ravacha Ravik afilu chita bechlal chita nusar v'chal sayer v'kusam es bechlal kusmin. Rameir was teaching us is that a wheat is another way of saying wheat kernels. A barley is barley kernels, even though it was said in the singular, it is including the general category of wheat, barley, and spelt. Says the Gemara halfway down the white lines of Bechesam and Halef. Ten libi kada nusumasiyad gezal fide sheishal biyadcha. Person demands that he give him all these items. Says the Gemara. Ten lichitin usayrin. The Mishnah says, if you say and you want wheat and barley, the same type of case. But he responds with one general shvua. He's chayiv one. Amar Rav Yochanan, pruta mikula misarefes. If he denies a pruta collectively between all the different items, they all combine to make him chayiv. Plegi ba Ravacha v'Ravina. So says the Gemara, this is a machlekes of Acha and Ravina. Chadamar aprati mechayiv akloli la mechayiv, chadamar akloli nami mechayiv. They debate in the case where someone says he's chayiv for each and every one. Does this mean he's chayiv for each prat, for each individualized grain? Or no, akloli mechayiv. And v'chadamar akloli nami mechayiv. V'atani Rav Kahana asked the Gemara, Rav Chia learned 7 lines to the bottom. Reikat Chamish Esri Chatois, 15 Chatois from Isan. If it's true, Esther Navan should be even more. Should be 20 for each and every one. Haitana Deprati Kachashav Dekloi Lechashav. That's why we got to 15 and not 20. Vatani Rav Chia Reikat Esri Chatois. That's another case. The Mishab Kadam Shubasad V'Gezva Aveda. So Bai Mine Rava Miriam Nachman. 4 lines from the bottom. Rava frags the Shaila to Rav Nachman. 5 people are claiming you owe us all. He says to one, I make a shvu, I don't have any of those things by you. And then he says, now, what is the case? I'll call Chada v'Chayiv as we turn over to Lamechazim Beis. What is his level of Chiyav when he articulates them all to one? And then he says, V'loi lach, v'loi lach, v'loi lach. Says the Gemara Tashema, I'll bring you a raya. On the second line of Lamechazim Beis, Tani Rabbi Chia teaches Rabbi Chia, Rekan Esther v'Chatois. If he articulated all the cases in Avad, that's 20. What else is it teaching us? What's the raya? Prata Havi that is considered explicating and saying each case in specific. We wrap up the parah quoting the last case in the Mishnah. Anasti upatisi asmiti. If someone says you violated, you seduced my daughter, says the Gemara. Amar Rav Chia Rav Yechon. My time there Rav Shimon. Hayol ve'ikr kanas hu taiveya. Since he's the ikr ta'as, the 50 shekel kasef is what he's being taiveya, not baishas and bagam. Amar Rava mashal de Rav Shimon lamad davar daim aladim sharm lechaver ten lechit to serve kosmen sheish libiyad on the second white line. Amar la ishvua shel chaviyat chitin v'shtakach. And it came out a what? The chitin have uday last. He didn't have chitin, but hasayrin v'kosmen islay. What's the halacha de pater? Why? The chishtaba chitin akushta mishtaba. He really swore truthfully, and he didn't say anything about the other items. So too in the Mishnah's case. Oh, even though it's true he did for baichs and begam. However, when he denied it, his kavana, his mindset was only on the kanas. Therefore, there's going to be no carbon for the shua sheker. Amrle Abaye, what? 4th line, me dami asab chitin kafar lebis ayim v'kosmen lo kafar le. He only denied chitin. Hacha bekulam also the kafar le. Halodami alalem lechaver ten lechitin asarim v'kosmen sheish libi ad chashush and lechavayadi klal. And then v'ishtacha chitin u'delas leipata asarim v'kosmen islay. In such a case, then avada you'd be mechayiv. So the Gemara flips it around and says l'chayri shavarai they're going to be chayiv the carbon shvua. Ela kiyasa Rav in 4 lines to the end of the paragraph. Rav Yechon different Rav Shimon kenasu taiveya v'loy b'ich tebeka. Rav Shimon holds that the taina is only for the case of kenas. So the machlekes is what is the tviyah? What is he money him for? So b'mayka mifli amar Papa Rav Shimon said v'lo shavkin should be the kids v'taviyah le'mid loy kids. Rav Shimon holds that we've had this Torah before. You don't leave something that's a set amount. You never be tevea something that he could potentially just negate. Difficult parakim. And we begin for a few moments diving into the Mishnah. In the next parak, the parak Shavuos Hadayanim. Says the Mishnah, Shavuos Hadayanim, Hatayna Shtei Kesef Adav Shava Pruta. When do the Dayanim make a Shavuah? If the Taina was 2 and he was made by 1, the classical made him mixas. But if he doesn't admit to that which he claimed, pot ketzad. Someone says you owe me 2 kasev ein lecha biyadi ela pruta potter. Shtei kasev upruta li biyadcha. And he responds in the pruta. Then his mother mixas is within that which he claimed, and he's going to be chayif. Case number 1 in the Mishnah: when there'll be a Shavuos at the end of the machlekes, if it has to be kein. Excuse me, not the machlekes. Says the Mishnah whether it has to be mimin atayna. Manali biyadcha in chabiyadi pater. Manali biyadcha in chabiyadi el chamishim dinner chayif. Manala abba biyadcha. Your father, to my father in your hands, you owe my father money. Ein chabiyadi el non dinner pater. V'neishu kemesha veda. So even though it's a form of maidim, it makes sense. But because the taina was for the father, that's called a mesha veda, and you're going to be pater. Manali biyadcha namar la hein yes lemachar. Hein yes, I owe you the money. Lemachar amar the next day he says to him, to know, give it to me in a sativ l'cha. He claims that he gave it to him, then pater. Ein l'cha biyadi, then I'll be chayiv. Manali biyadcha amar la hein yes, al titaneu li ela beidim. Don't give it to me with hate, only with hate him. Lamach amar le'tanei give it to me. Nesativ l'cha chayv. They start l'nai be'edim. Next case, and of course the Gemara is going to go through each and every one of these cases. Says the Gemara Mishnah, litra zav yeshli b'yadcha. If someone says you owe me a liter of gold, and the chabiyad yel litra kesef. Yes, I owed you, but not gold, but rather kesef. Potter dinner zav yeshli b'yadcha, and he's saying the chabiyad dinner kesef utraces upondis upruta. Then you're going to be chayiv. Why? Shakol min matbei achas is all one type of coin. Next case in the Mishnah. Kor tvua livi adcha. Ein chabiyal letach kitnius is potter. Again, it's not a hoidami min hatayna. Kor peiris livi adcha. Ein chabiyal letach kitnius chayiv. Shakitnius b'chlal peiris. And again, the one you cite over here, they're going to be a chayiv a shvua when the haidah, the maidim mix says is min hatayna. It's of that which he was claiming. And if he says you owe me wheat, and you made a barley, potter. You owe me jugs of oil. We had many of these cases in Bab Mitzia v'chulu v'adla b'kankanim. It's partially the same thing. At least the jug yishava. Chamrim no ein aida mimin atayna. Amrim Rav Gamliel Ryan he is different. Admain I hold of admain. Tana kilim v'karkais. He says you owe me vessels and land, or bekarkais cover bekelim, potter. Haidu mix as a karkais potter, but mix that kelim chayiv because again you're potter and karka chayiv and kelim. Shalachasim shelim achayis zoykikin are pulled along is chasim shelim achayis lishav aleim to create a shvua. Ein nishvan laten cheshutz v'katan. For cheshutz v'katan makes a taina you don't have a shvua. Vein mashvin as a katan, but mashvin likatan and lehektish. Pick it up from the Gemara, B'siyata Dishmai.